On September 16th, Moscow City is also under attack. Boom! Bada boom! I'm telling you. An emergency evacuation of the business center is beginning right now. Thousands of employees are fleeing their jobs. The SU is using Ukrainian ballistic missiles and Western missiles to strike the center of Moscow and St. Petersburg. Whoa, that was a hit. At this very moment, Moscow City is switching its employees to remote work. Only security and a couple of duty staff remain in the central VTB office. All this is happening against the backdrop of drone attacks and the threat of direct hits on the towers. American JASSM missiles and possibly Tomahawks will be heading for the Kremlin. Moscow City is under attack. An emergency evacuation of the business center is starting right now. Thousands of employees are being led out from their workplaces. Trump has authorized strikes on Moscow and St. Petersburg. Both Moscow and the Moscow region are being attacked by Ukrainian drones.
And boom!
Bada boom!
The local shows 623, 126, 126. Where do you land? Something's burning here. That's kind of strange.
Donald Trump privately suggested to Zelensky to strike Moscow and St. Petersburg. The new US president is convinced that only strikes on Russian cities will force the Kremlin to negotiate. At this very moment, Moscow City is switching its employees to remote work. Only security and a couple of duty staff remain in the central VTB office. All this is happening against the backdrop of new attacks, drones, and the threat of direct hits on the towers. And all of this is a new phase of the war, and we see Russia truly afraid for the first time. What kind of signal did Trump send? What missiles could be supplied to Ukraine? JASSM or Tomahawks? Why is Putin running, and why is Moscow trembling? We'll discuss all this with top analyst Oleksandr Demchenko right now. Friends, please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Sasha and I work together twice a week on my YouTube channel. Sasha, the most important question, what happens now?
Strikes on Moscow. In the coming days, Moscow is preparing for a reason. Moscow City is being evacuated. Everyone is switching to remote work. It's not for nothing that officially Z-bloggers, war correspondents, even official authorities and military generals have started talking about the fact that yes, there will be a combined missile and drone strike directly on Moscow. In other words, they are preparing for a tough response. We discussed ourselves literally this week that these days there would be a harsh retaliation. I said before, wait 10 days, there will be a response. Well, here you go. I gave 10 days, and as you can see, I turned out to be right. Maybe even assessed the situation a bit more accurately than perhaps even Donald Trump. That's just a joke, even. The question is, there will be a response, there will be a harsh strike, and Moscow is preparing for it. Most likely for the first time, Moscow will go up in flames. All those Patriki, all that Rubliovka will burn. They don't feel the war over there. You see, a lot of people here ask me, but they're hitting Kyiv. Very often representatives of the Russian political emigrant community ask me this question. They're hitting Kyiv, but Kyiv keeps working, standing, living, and so on. I say yes. But Kyiv feels that the war has long since come to the Ukrainian capital. And Moscow doesn't feel that yet. But now it will. 100%. Everyone will feel it. Dmitry Medvedev, who, after getting drunk, started talking about how Trump is just decorative with his statements. The only one who's decorative is Dmitry Anatolievich Medvedev. In terms of height, intellectual abilities, how he managed to drink away his power in a single night, and his cowardice. Decorative. And especially now, as he tries to suck up to Putin, afraid that he'll be taken out. A tweet here, a tweet there. You see? One moment Trump is criticized, the next he's praised. It all depends on Vladimir Putin's mood. A man who drank away his power in a single night and handed it over to Putin and Patrushev by the lake. Gave up power in one night, afraid that he would be drowned. In just one night. Now talking about being decorative. There is no one more decorative in the Russian power structure than Dmitry Medvedev. You can just remember that for the rest of your life. Just carve that into your memory wherever you like. That's the first thing. Second, of course, the fact that they're now moving not just military enterprises to remote work, but also Moscow City, the elite office complex where Viktor Yanukovych's son has offices, where Demchenko has offices, and where a huge number of Russian security officials have offices. FSB officers have offices there. Bashar Assad and his family have an apartment there. This suggests that most likely they are going to shoot things down, they want to shoot things down, and they don't care where they do it. Obviously, the goal is to prevent drones from hitting the Kremlin or any other important military targets, military facilities, like the General Staff on Frunzenskaya near Arbat. So what we've been talking about and predicting with you, Dasha, over the past weeks and months is starting to come true. Many people thought we were crazy, that we were making things up. No. Well, here you go. Now, drones and missiles will be flying. It's not just Daria and I saying this about the situation. It's not just us saying this. Over in Russia, Gerasimov is saying it. The whole propaganda pack is talking about it. They're broadcasting it everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Moscow will burn. What does Trump say? Why aren't you striking Moscow? As you correctly mentioned in the preview, why aren't you striking Moscow? There's no weapon. Give us weapons and we'll strike. Fine, but then don't just strike Moscow, strike St. Petersburg too. In other words, the Americans are raising the stakes. It's just that Putin went all in. And Trump thought, well, fine, but I've got more trump cards. After all, my name literally means trump card. So let me play my own hand. And he did. Now he's considering supplying Tomahawks to Ukraine. That's the weapon that pierced 2 nuclear facilities in Iran. Tomahawk, 30 Tomahawks. There are no longer 2 nuclear plants in Iran. So why do we think there couldn't be several nuclear plants on Russian territory after a Tomahawk strike? Now, as for deliveries to Ukraine, air-to-air missiles and ballistic missiles will be sent. And we're saying that most likely Donald Trump gave a signal, quite a public one, without any ambiguity, showing everything, demonstrating it to Vladimir Putin. Catastrophic strikes on Moscow will follow. And now there will be combined strikes, drones, missiles. They'll simply turn off the lights over Moscow. And they'll turn off the lights over all of Russia, and the lights will go out over Vladimir Putin's regime as well. It's long overdue. And if even Trump is asking, so why aren't you striking? That means the idea has probably already formed in his mind. A 100% clear idea. Why not do something to make things unpleasant for Vladimir Putin? Surely that's what they're betting on. So I'm expecting a major fire in the center of Moscow in the near future. Absolutely everything will burn, and that's already inevitable. They brought this disaster into their own home when they started the war. They brought this disaster into their own home when they chose Vladimir Putin yet again, when they helped him dismantle the constitution, when they helped him orchestrate Bucha, Hostomel, Irpin, Trostianets, Mariupol, and the rest. They are the ones to blame for this. They brought this nightmare upon themselves. Now it won't just be hellish sanctions, now it will be hell on earth. Trump promised hell on earth for Iran. But in reality, it turned out to come to Vladimir Putin.
Friends, write in the comments what you think about the potential transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. That really would be a decisive game changer. Write what you think about the JASSMs, about the call, and about the phone conversation between Zelensky and Trump when basically Trump asked, why aren't you striking Moscow? President Zelensky said, we have nothing to strike with, and now Trump is giving them something to strike with. Sash, let me add a bit of a fly in the ointment to our barrel of honey. Many military analysts immediately wrote that Trump simply allowed Putin to seize the entire Donbas to continue his military actions, his offensive, aggressive terrorist operation. And only after that would he introduce something. In other words, there were some kind of agreements between Trump and Putin, like go ahead and seize what you need and then we'll impose sanctions. What do you think?
Dasha, you see, that's not how it works. If there had been a deal between Trump and Putin, the NATO Secretary General wouldn't have been in Washington. There wouldn't have been any negotiations between the Europeans and Trump. None of this would have happened. And no one would have given anything to Ukraine. A deal is formed in a completely different way. First of all, a shipment of weapons has to arrive. Let me remind you that Trump gave Iran 60 days. On the 61st day, the Israelis launched a strike. For that strike to happen, everything had to be in place. That included the arrival of American carrier groups as well. American fighter jets had to arrive, as well as American reconnaissance planes, American intelligence data, and the intelligence services had to work to figure out who was where, how they were positioned, and in which bunker Ayatollah Khamenei was hiding. It's the same situation here. Stockpile weapons, accumulate systems, acquire anti-missile systems, and then carry out strikes, retaliatory strikes against. This is what Vladimir Putin will do. And yes, of course, Putin will strike. It's clear that he will try to advance in Donbas. These things are obvious even. But in 3.5 years of war, Putin has not been able to seize Donbass. And in fact, since 2014, he hasn't been able to take Donbass. That's the first story. The second, obviously, it's necessary to reach an agreement with India and China. Because right now, Trump is negotiating with both the Indians and the Chinese. And these negotiations are about tariffs. And here, the issue is trade. Lavrov came to Beijing after visiting North Korea, as you know. Right now, Lavrov is in Beijing. And he is holding talks with Xi Jinping. And the Chinese side has said that it will support Russia even more. Well, fine, they'll give more support, but they'll get sanctions in return. We're not talking about sanctions against Russia itself. We're talking about secondary sanctions. And the workshop itself against China, against India, against the purchasing countries, against companies and legal entities that buy oil, gas, nuclear materials, electricity, coal from Russia, and so on down the list. That's what we're talking about. Secondary sanctions, strikes against the purchasing countries, countries that allow the Russian oil fleet to sell everything under the sun and to operate freely, that even allow direct some shadow deals and let goods pass through their territories. Turkey, for example, Azerbaijan, Central Asia, China as well, and so on down the list. That's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about some countries in the European community as well. And which side will they officially and finally take so that everyone understands the game being played? And third, listen, in September, the official procedure for adopting the federal state budget begins. We need to understand whether Vladimir Putin will make any moves or not. What appropriations, what funds to allocate, what to allocate them for, how much to allocate to Ukraine for direct opposition to Putin. What will Putin do? We need to assess the behavior of the Kremlin dictator, the Russian troops, and so on right now. What happens next? Once they've assessed, they'll strike. There's simply no other way out of this situation. Vladimir Putin himself has overturned the board. I think he really regrets it now. He's biting his nails, his elbows, he's biting everything he can. But the problem is, Dasha, that he's the one to blame for this whole story. He overdid it, he ruined everything, as the New York Times rightly pointed out. Now, very difficult, catastrophic times await Putin. There's another reason too, Dasha. Putin started purging his elite at the wrong time. He killed the Minister of Transport, Starovoy. He went after the Kemezov clan, his recent friend. He started cracking down once again on the Shoigu clan, Patrushev, and so on. He started coming down on them hard. And these repressive measures are gaining more and more momentum. He started destroying his elite at the wrong time because right now the elite should be united. And when half of the elite fears for their lives, when ministers, 9 people, vote with their feet, vice premiers, ministers, top officials vote with their feet and come to the funeral to Starovoytovas, and Putin mocks them, sometimes saying that a wreath was sent, then later takes his words back. And they understand that now, well, fine, soon Lubyanka will come after their asses too. So what we're talking about is that there will be pressure. Trump, economic problems in Russia, a mess. And at the same time, possibly the beginning of some kind of coup d'etat. Because the oligarchs who bankroll these ministers, the officials, the military leadership, they all understand perfectly well that Putin started the first battle, that Putin struck the first blow against them. If they don't respond, they're finished. Now Trump will apply pressure, and they will apply pressure, and they will destabilize the situation. I don't know, Dasha, whether we'll wake up tomorrow or the day after to the news that tanks have entered Moscow, surrounded the Kremlin, and Putin is gone. A coup in Russia, hooray. I don't know. But the fact that they will act and watch how forcefully Trump goes after Putin and base their actions on that is undeniable. This is probably one of the most turbulent periods of this war. Throughout this war, it won't be easy. It will be turbulent. At times it will be harsh. But for Putin, in the end, it will end badly. These are fateful days for the war, for Ukraine, yes. But these are dark and grim days for Vladimir Putin. Trump has no other way. He can't back down anymore, to use Margarita Simonian's words. He simply can't anymore. And Putin will choke on him. And that's Vladimir Putin's fault. He himself is to blame for what happened.
Are Tomahawk missiles a reality in the coming months, or is that still unrealistic for now?
This raising of the stakes by Trump is blackmail against Putin. Trump has shown him several times what the Tomahawk system is, what Tomahawk missiles are. He showed it once in Syria when he destroyed, just obliterated, the Syrian bases where Russian military and Russian aircraft were stationed. He also demonstrated what American weapons are capable of with the example of the Wagner mercenaries, whom he wiped out as well. He showed what Tomahawks are in the case of Iran. And now he says, that's it, I'll send Tomahawks to both Zelensky and Ukraine. Hundreds of them. Take your pick. In other words, he's raising the stakes. But he doesn't want the war to really turn into a global major conflict. He doesn't want to fight Putin one-on-one, but he probably has to do it, or will have to do it. But for now, he's just raising the stakes, to the limit, to the extreme. Trump has a higher ceiling of possibilities. He has more room to maneuver, you see? He's showing Putin, I can even give tomahawks. And you have nothing to counter these tomahawks with. I have Patriots. My Patriots are the best anti-missiles, and you don't have them. If there has already been a strike on Siberia and Siberia has been burning, I don't even know if it's the second or third time just in the past month. You see, in the past, Russia's vast territory was an asset. A huge territory, good luck making it all the way through. You'd get to the Urals, and then somewhere beyond that, you'd just give up and turn back home. Now, Russia's vast territory is actually a disadvantage. It's a negative factor, because it's impossible to cover it with anti-drone systems, anti-missile systems, you see? It's impossible. So once again, they'll cover Putin's rear somewhere near the Kremlin while all of Moscow will be burning. They'll protect St. Petersburg and Siberia will be burning. You understand? So cruise missiles are a real prospect for the future. And when Putin says, that's it no more, and most likely he will say no, he really has no other option. He can't show any weakness. He can't show his security forces, on whom he depends and who are the foundation of all his power, that, guys, I got scared, I can't do it. He will go all the way. He will keep making mistake after mistake. But Trump will keep pushing further and further, together with the Europeans and everyone else. Eventually, we will reach a situation where China will have to get directly and openly involved. Directly and openly involved. And we're already approaching that situation.
Everyone has already written that things are starting to heat up in Sevastopol. Pro-Russian public pages in the occupied Crimea are writing that Trump might strike Sevastopol with JASSM missiles, which have replaced Tomahawks. They also write, almost in their latest comments, that Trump is considering supplying Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles, which could hit Moscow and St. Petersburg. Panic is starting in Crimea, and propagandists are already howling. So this is exactly that. The zone of tension that is now rapidly developing in Russian military public pages. Tell me.
And notice, Dash, Trump hasn't supplied anything yet. You see, that's a skill in itself. He hasn't done anything yet, and the Moscow exchange is already starting to fall. He hasn't done anything yet, and the public pages are already howling. He hasn't done anything yet, and already half of Moscow is being evacuated in Russia. He hasn't done anything yet, and already problems are starting in Crimea. And there aren't even any Tomahawks there yet. Now, attention, friends, imagine this situation. There are Tomahawks, and Tomahawks are being launched. Just multiply all this hysteria by 10 or even 100. Multiply it. They'll go crazy. They aren't even there yet, and they're already starting to talk about how it's all for show. And when they are there, I don't know, they'll all just disappear. As soon as Tomahawks start flying toward Moscow, the first person to disappear from Moscow will be Dmitry Anatolievich Medvedev. And that's already happened before. Are you even laughing now? But that's how it was. When Prigozhin was marching on Moscow through the Rostov region, who was the first to run away? Everyone else stayed. No one understood anything. Everyone stayed in their places. Everyone was afraid. Who ran away? Putin and Medvedev? Putin took Medvedev by the hand because according to the constitution, if anything happens, Medvedev also has a lifetime term that he is untouchable. Medvedev. The only president who is untouchable besides Putin is Medvedev. He took Medvedev by the hand, like a bride, and flew off with him in an unknown direction, to some kind of bunker. And this time, as soon as Tomahawks or something else start flying toward Moscow or anywhere else, Medvedev will immediately disappear. He'll be gone right away, because everything about Dmitry Medvedev is just for show.
Sasha, did you notice how, he trolled and mocked him? That's putting it pretty harshly. The NATO Secretary General did this to Medinsky during the negotiations, when they were discussing things with Trump. So Trump was trying to explain, I call Putin, Putin says everything is fine. Then my wife Melania tells me they're bombing Kyiv. What's so fine about that? And I believed him, but then the NATO Secretary General Rutte tells him this. How can you believe them if they send Medinsky to spout some kind of nonsense, pseudo-historical nonsense about Russia?
No, what they said was that Putin sent some crazy historian who started talking about Russian history, beginning from the year 1245. So as for Trump, obviously someone once told him about Medinsky and he forgot about him. Medinsky is not the kind of person you need to remember, honestly. And Medinsky's books aren't the kind of books you need to keep rereading. But it's just that once again, Trump showed that Putin sends some random people to negotiations and doesn't take the talk seriously. What does this mean? It means that sooner or later, if Putin is told directly, look, if you go to negotiations, no more Medinskys, only key figures, people who actually make decisions, and you personally, nothing else. I won't accept anything else. There's no room for maneuver anymore, Sasha. You can't send Medinsky. You can't send some random person from some unknown department or one of your advisors. Only top-level representatives and only you personally. Where your signature is at the end on the peace agreement and so on. Because Putin was basically given an ultimatum. Either a peace agreement with Zelensky within 50 days, or I'll tear you and your regime to pieces. That's all that was conveyed to him. As for Melania Trump, we need to urgently check if she has Ukrainian roots. I think that this is the person who is sitting there. I can just picture this scene, I don't know why, but I can clearly imagine this scene. Trump comes home, tired after work, he saw soccer for the first time, he visited some stadium, he cut some ribbon, I don't know, drank some Coca-Cola, pressed the red button, and they brought him a Coke. The man is tired. He comes home, goes up to the second floor of the White House, comes in, and Melania says, I had a wonderful conversation with Vladimir Putin. She says, can you imagine, Donald? They hit Kyiv, they hit Lutsk. So I think we finally found the person who really knows the geography of Ukraine well. Sasha, who was at the inauguration.
And if I'm not mistaken, it was Melania Trump who introduced Oleksandr Demchenko, a Ukrainian, Miss Ukraine, to her future husband, who later became her husband and business partner of Donald Trump. As I understand it, if Melania Trump has any affection for Ukraine, it's because of Sasha Nikolenko, since they're friends. And since Melania is European, in principle, she should know European geography because she's not American. This is about how Trump fights against migrants, even though his wife isn't American and was born in Europe.
Well, you see, for example, I wouldn't have made that connection myself regarding Sasha Nikolenko. But if that's the case, then I want to tell you that Melania Trump and Trump himself, in principle, have a daily review of the situation in Ukraine. And that's a good thing. If he has already said this directly, Sasha, it means this information is reaching him. And that's also good. It's good, really.
Of course, we still need to discuss Putin's actions after all of this. You have absolutely conveyed the meaning of Dmitry Medvedev's post, which ends with the following. The world's shadowed expert in the consequences of the belligerent Europe was disappointed Russia didn't care. In other words, Russia doesn't care. That's what Medvedev stated. But the question is, what will Putin do if Medvedev is saying that Russia didn't care, meaning it doesn't care about all these words from Trump and all his threats?
Putin does care. Putin will now try in these 50 days to restore contact with Trump. But at the same time, he will strike at Ukraine. These are two things that at first glance seem completely unrelated. But that's how it will be. In the end, nothing will work out for him. Listen, Trump negotiated with the Iranians for 60 days. He negotiated with the Iranians for 60 days. He talked with them. His representatives met with them. The media told everyone that he was putting direct pressure on Melania. But in the end, it turned out that Mossad carried out 3 brilliant special military operations together with the Israeli military intelligence Aman. Then it turned out that Trump gathered troops and struck Iran. Putin can do whatever he wants to do. But weapons have been sent to Ukraine. And missiles will be sent to Russia, to Moscow first and foremost. What is Vladimir Putin doing today? Yes, that's what's interesting. We're missing this. So what is Vladimir Putin doing today? Russia launches a drone which first flies into Ukrainian territory, then turns toward Belarusian territory. It flies over Belarus, then returns from Belarusian territory, supposedly as if a Belarusian drone is flying into Ukraine to strike Chernihiv or Kyiv from the north. So, obviously, Vladimir Putin wanted to provoke this situation and do everything to pull Lukashenko away from the Americans, from Trump, to break that connection. What does Lukashenko do? Attention. Lukashenko suddenly scrambles a helicopter and destroys the drone at the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. What does this mean? This means that Vladimir Putin still wants to drag Lukashenko into this war, to do everything to neutralize Lukashenko, to gain control over Belarus and send his army through Belarusian territory, to use Belarus as a staging ground, either against NATO forces in the east, or rather in the west, or directly for Putin, or directly against Ukraine from the north. But what we're talking about, Sasha, is that Vladimir Putin has clearly realized that Lukashenko is backing out, that Lukashenko is trying to distance himself, that Lukashenko doesn't want to be tied together with Putin right now, that Lukashenko has started actively flirting with Trump, and that Lukashenko has been promised something, and it's something very tempting. And Lukashenko doesn't want to lose sight of that tempting offer. He doesn't want to. But Putin really wants Lukashenko to break away from Trump. Did you notice one of the most important pieces of news that came from Trump, aside from the topic of Ukraine, during his speech in the Oval Office with Mark Rutte and the NATO Secretary General, was the following: that the United States is directly influencing and was the party that reconciled, that began the process of reconciliation and drafting a peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In other words, it's Trump who is taking the Caucasus away from Putin. America is taking the Caucasus away from Putin. So we were wondering why all of this is happening. Trump. That's why all of this is happening. So, attention, Dash. Finland, Sweden, NATO bases, St. Petersburg is surrounded. Troops are practically at the doorstep. NATO and St. Petersburg. Soon there will be a border breakthrough. At the same time, British and French troops will be in Ukraine, and also troops from 28 other NATO member countries, after it ends. Or more precisely, after the start of the ceasefire, the so-called silence regime. Attention, there will be a Turkish NATO base in Azerbaijan, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Russian base in Gyumri, Armenia, disappears. If Armenia shuts down all Russian bases on its territory. What do I think? I think that Vladimir Putin, who has clearly realized that he won't be able to take Ukraine no matter how hard he tries, wants to drag out the war. It's one thing when you're playing to exhaust Ukraine's supplies and resources, but it's a completely different matter when you're trying to wear down America's resources. They're not even comparable. You have far fewer resources and you'll lose this war. If Trump gets involved, and he has, Putin will look for other opportunities for himself. I think we need to consider two, or rather three, scenarios. The first scenario is a full-scale attempt to occupy Belarus and eliminate the Lukashenko regime, including Lukashenko himself. The second is a direct attempt to undermine. The first is Armenia, and possibly even an attempt to occupy Armenia. And the third scenario is the start of a military campaign against Georgia. I think in the near future we might witness these very scenarios. Putin will choose one of these scenarios for himself because the population, the masses, need something to be shown on television. This is what they'll be showing now.
Sasha, a quick side note. There's a whole article out about Melania Trump. As they say, we're ahead of the curve. The Times writes, it's a big article. Zelensky has gained an unexpected ally in the White House, Melania Trump. According to the publication, she actively reminds Trump about the victims of Russian strikes. In February 2022, she publicly called the killing of peaceful Ukrainians horrible, tragic murders of innocent people. While Trump called Putin smart and brilliant, Melania called him a fiend. She constantly appealed to her followers to help Ukraine. She has much more political influence over her husband than was previously thought. I would note that despite the presence of numerous security and foreign policy advisors, her voice can be decisive. Trump listens to certain people, especially those close to him, and even more so if their last name is Trump. Sasha, what do you think?
I would say that we've gained an unexpected ally. No one expected this, we've gained an unexpected ally, and that's actually great news, Dasha. You know, it is actually a very nice development. Because for quite a long time, Ukraine has been searching for different ways and various approaches to convince former President Trump. And it turned out there wasn't really any need to search. It turned out that there's the First Lady who can, bypassing everyone else, just come and say, Donald, it's time to be done with Volodya Putin. End it with him. I don't like him. And as it turns out, for Trump, that's enough. That's more than enough, much more than all the negotiations with Putin, more than any persuasion from the Senate, Congress, and so on, more than Elon Musk, who's half crazy. It turns out Melania Trump is quite enough. This is very good news for Ukraine, really. Although, honestly, I don't know what will happen next. I don't know what level of influence she'll have, whether she'll continue to support Ukraine or not. But as things stand today, if thanks to Melania Trump Ukraine gets deadly missiles, full protection of its skies, 17 Patriots, and even Tomahawk missiles, then they should put up a monument to her in the center of Kyiv and name a street after Melania Trump.
Yes, you're right, Sasha. And most importantly, as you always say, Putin did certain things with his underwear and slapped Trump across the face with it. And The Atlantic completely agrees with you, because The Atlantic also... So The Atlantic wrote to her about the reasons for the increased US aid to Ukraine. Putin officially humiliated Trump. He simply humiliated Trump officially. And Trump can't get over it. There you go. A public humiliation.
I think, by the way, Trump even told Melania about it, that she listened. He's just humiliating you. And that's where it all ended, you see? And then things kept moving. Here we are, talking and talking. Things started moving. So what's the conclusion? The action has started. They wanted action. They can't live without it. Well, here you go now. This is your chance. So get your action and go on and take it.
Sash, news is breaking while we're recording this stream. Germany might buy a Typhoon launcher from the US to launch Tomahawk missiles. So as I understand it, Tomahawks have become our new buzzword. Now that's all we talk about.
Dash. So what does this indicate? It indicates that Trump has cut loose. Now he's going to blackmail Putin every single day. Remember, Solovyov was recently shouting about 2 Poseidons that would drown America with a nuclear wave. Just the other day, Solovyov was shouting about this. There's no need for a Solovyov in America. They have Trump. Now, Trump has more different kinds of weapons than Russia does. Now, Trump will be telling absolutely everyone in the world about it every day. About what are the best, most powerful weapon systems and how Russia will burn with the help of these weapon systems. Now imagine 50 days of this targeted informational bombardment of the Kremlin, Medvedev, and everyone else. There is a very good chance that even before those 50 days have fully passed, someone in the Kremlin will ultimately decide to throw in the towel. Because they probably won't be able to withstand such an information attack. Seriously. They're more likely to crap themselves.
Sasha, to sum up, what do you think will happen in Europe? Right now, Germany is being called Ukraine's main ally because almost all supplies will go through Germany. That's very important. The NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has also done a lot. Again, Fico is in hysterics, Orban and others too, and now even Malta is joining in. Basically, Russian enclaves in Europe. What should we do? And will oil prices finally go down?
Trump will deal with these guys if Putin really pushes him to the end. Because if anyone has direct influence over Orban and Fico, it's Trump. Moreover, if he turns a blind eye to certain things, the European Union will put the squeeze on them. For example, when Germany stops supplying cars from Hungary, Orban will raise the white flag and say, I agree to everything. This has happened before. When he was blackmailed with cars with automobiles, he immediately made all the necessary pro-Ukrainian decisions. Do you remember that situation when the former Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, told him to take a walk in the hallway while the vote was taking place? He might have to take a walk more than once if necessary. A lot has changed in just the last few days. The board has been flipped over. We still don't fully realize that this is a new stage in the war. And this stage is clearly not in Vladimir Putin's favor. A lot has changed. The pace is just insane. It's a terrifying pace. There was this kind of momentum at the start of the big war, at the beginning of the invasion. Probably in the first 6 months to a year. What we're seeing now is a new impulse. Everyone was hoping there would be some kind of reconciliation. There was hope. Trump probably had that hope too. It wasn't really hope, but rather an illusion he probably had. Or thoughts that he could make a deal with Putin, that there would be some agreement and basically even profit from Russia. The deal is over, the illusions are over. And now there's a new impulse. It seems Trump actually liked the idea of fighting. Trump probably liked the image of a burning Moscow. I don't know how long that image will stay in his mind. Maybe until the trial, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 years. I don't know. But that he'll take it out on Putin, that's 100%. What will happen in Russia now? Flames. What will happen in America now? The desire to start those flames. What will happen in Europe now? The desire to help ignite those flames. What will happen in Ukraine now? A new impulse, a new hope that Vladimir Putin's regime will finally collapse. And I am incredibly glad about that, because I repeat every single time, freedom and hope are the last things Vladimir Putin can try to take from us, but he will never succeed.
A wonderful ending, dear audience. Sasha and I work for you in the Sasha plus Sasha format, Sasha plus Sasha twice a week. Write a few words in support of our tandem. I know you write a lot of different comments. I read them, I give them hearts, so thank you very much. Let us know where you're watching from. Tell us your viewing geography. Every Tuesday, Sunday, Wednesday, and Monday, we're on my YouTube channel, Sasha Shaslivaya, and on Dmitry Gordon's YouTube channel. Top analyst Oleksandr Demchenko. Sasha, thank you very much. And see you already this weekend.
Until next time.